Well, when most of us decided that we needed to get rid of porn, it was because, well, to put it simply, we needed to get rid of the pain that it was causing us. I mean, it really was that simple, right? But as you get into recovery, here's the thing. You realize it is a whole lot more multifaceted. And it becomes a whole lot more than just not looking at porn. For those of you who have been to a 12-step group, you've probably been exposed to the idea that the recovery journey is as much of a spiritual journey as it is a practical one. Today, as we explore our journey out of porn, I want to introduce something called stage theory, and in particular, I want to look at some of the critical steps that we are going to need to take and things that we're going to have to deal with if we are going to truly proceed very far down the recovery path. So welcome aboard.
Ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Well, here we are in March of 2024. Obviously, winter's not done yet. I went to go out for a walk this morning and there was 2 inches of snow. So it's all good. I just bundled up and got out for my walk. So it was good to do that. And I guess spring is just going to have to wait a little bit longer. Let me just say, if you want to connect with somebody around getting some hope around how to get rid of this horrible, painful, but pleasurable thing in your life called porn, I'd love you to reach out to me. I talk with guys individually. I coach guys individually. Some guys just show up for some encouragement and we meet on a Zoom call and I just hear some of your story and you get to hear some of mine, and really is something that I love to do. So if you want to reach out to me or maybe find out some information on a 52-week video course called Finding Traction, same name as this podcast, or you want to even explore what would it look like to get involved with a group of guys. Most of our groups are just 5 or 6 guys, and we journey together. And it's amazing how close and connected we feel. It's amazing the changes that happen over the time we're together. If any of that interests you, please reach out to me at bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. Well, let's talk a little bit more about this idea of some of the stages of recovery. Recently, or actually yesterday, I did a talk around the topic of spiritual formation, how people change and grow spiritually. Now, remember, I said that you're actually going to realize that your recovery journey is more than just a practical journey. It actually will end up being a spiritual journey. If you're interested in that talk, and that talk is more of a focused on spiritual development, particularly from a Christian standpoint, you can go to a podcast called Chilliwack Vineyard and look for a picture of a bar sign, a tavern sign, that says the name or bears the name Grace on Tap. My dad used to run a tavern in northern Idaho, and when he passed away, I took his beer sign, one of his beer signs, he had many of them, and I had it changed from being, I think it was Budweiser on tap to Grace on Tap. But in that talk that I did, I drew heavily on a book called The Critical Journey, that people who work in helping people grow spiritually, they've noticed some common points along the progression pathway. I think the authors are Janet Hagberg and Robert Gulick. So if you're interested in the book. But it was interesting, as I was doing that yesterday, I was really struck by how many parallels there were to not just a spiritual journey, but the journey of recovery from porn that many of us are seeking to walk out. And no matter what your faith expression is or your understanding of a spiritual worldview, I do think that some of the insights from this book and this whole recovery stage idea can really be helpful in most of us who listen to this podcast that are seeking to develop a new lifestyle which is free from porn. I think some of these stages or some of the things I share will help us examine where we're at in our recovery and if we are growing or we're remaining stuck. I don't know if when you were a little boy you had in your house these, on a door frame or beside a door, your parents would measure your growth. They would tell you not to be on your tippy toes, but stand flat on your feet. And then they took a pencil and they marked how high you were at the top of your head. And then they would write beside that the date. Of course, as you did that year after year, you could see your growth. It's interesting. Some years it's like you grew very little. Then some years maybe you had a growth spurt. So I don't know if that reminds anybody of what they did growing up. But we did that. And we always would compare ourselves, of course, to our brothers and sisters. And I think it speaks to a common human need to know, are we growing? Are we progressing? And so I think you might find some of these steps helpful as you look at, well, am I actually growing and changing in this pathway away from porn? Maybe a different word picture is the idea of taking a long trip in a car. And now this really dates me, but we actually used to have paper road maps. And as we went on a long trip, I would be one of those kids that was saying, how much longer? Or are we there yet? And sometimes my dad would just hand me the paper map. And there was something about simply charting, the next town when we get there. It helped not only make the route more understandable, but it just kind of, okay, we're moving along, we're growing, we're progressing, we're getting closer to our goal. It always took longer, than it felt like it needed to take, but it was helpful. So maybe this will give you a bit of a higher view of what you're seeking to do as you journey away from porn. So here's the steps. Again, I've changed them to fit a recovery paradigm. And so I'm going to call stage 1 the awakening, stage 2 the growth spurt, stage 3 the productive life, stage 4 the journey inward, stage 5 the journey outward, and stage 6 a life of love. So there's 6 stages. And let me also say there's one further dynamic that can happen in any of these early stages, and it's called the wall. W-A-L-L. And we'll get to that. And let me just say, not everybody will move through these 6 stages. There's guys in recovery that get stuck at one stage. They fail to progress. They fail to move towards one of the later stages. Or there's people that simply check out the recovery journey altogether. And they simply move away from it and they say, you know what, I'm not going to pursue this in my life. So, again, I recognize that I'm taking a book which was not focused on recovery, and I am attempting to shoehorn these lessons into a recovery mindset. So some of these may seem more appropriate than others, but bear with me. I think there will be insights that can help you. And what I want to do, by and large, for each stage is talk about what the stage is about, what it looks like and feels like when you're in that stage, how you can get stuck in that stage, and finally, what is necessary to proceed to the next stage. So, we're ready to start out the journey. Let's start with the first one. Stage 1 is awakening. Something woke us up to the need for recovery. Something had to get our attention. And usually the best thing to get your attention is that 4-letter word called pain. Pain is another word for the wall. Somewhere along the line, pain broke into your life with such intensity that the pain of not changing became greater than the pain of changing. Maybe it was being found out, or losing your job, or losing your keys to your house or the bedroom. Or maybe it was the pain, the internal pain of living a life of duplicity, so you came clean. I talked to one guy recently, and it was almost like he got to the point where he could hardly breathe. The weight of duplicity was just so heavy on him. In recovery language, sometimes this wall is called rock bottom, and it looks different for everybody. But at some point in the awakening, people have what is like a recovery awakening, or an epiphany, or a moment of clarity. And they go, that's it. I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. I want a different life than the one I have been living. And when people move into that stage, the question is, well, what does that look like and feel like? Well, actually, that new insight can be tremendously exciting and motivating. It actually can feel like coming to life. And that awakening, it could be emotional, it could be intellectual, or both. It may be the result of a moment of clarity, or it could be the result of a gradual process. But usually in this stage, we feel energized. Sometimes it's tinged with regret. Why did I wait so long? If only I had seen this before. Sounds good, right? So how do people get stuck at that stage? Well, for one, they go, I'm going to add recovery to my life, but they're unwilling to actually apply a process of subtraction. In other words, they want to add recovery, but they want to keep as many things in their life as possible. In other words, they want recovery by addition, but they avoid recovery by subtraction. Another way that people get stuck in this stage is they seek to live out their recovery on merely individualistic terms, apart from any community experience. Now, on one hand, that keeps them safe and protected. However, it results in them getting stuck. So, what is needed to move to the next stage? Well, it's just the reverse of those last two things I mentioned. They need to be willing to remove things that stand in their way. Mark Dennison, one of the guys I work with, has this quote, to be 95% in is to be 100% out. The other thing is they need to be willing to journey with others. One guy recently joined one of our groups, and he said, for years I lived with this belief, I have to do this on my own. And he finally got to a point, due to some things that happened in his life, where that belief system was challenged and confronted, and he realized this is not working for me. So that's all about stage 1. Stage 2 is growth. In this stage is characterized by learning and growing and belonging. So in this stage, you learn all you can about recovery. You might listen to podcasts. I was talking to my buddy Matt Dobshoes today. from Porn Free Radio. And he said somebody just contacted him. He said, I listened to every one of your podcasts except the football ones. And I'm going, what? Those are the best ones. No, because they're dated now, of course. But or they listen to the Finding Traction podcast and they go back because they're hungry. They want to learn. They're motivated, and they begin to attempt and try to practice new tools. And how does it feel? It feels excited. You feel excited. You're learning. You're growing. And in that way, you're putting things into practice. And you're learning some new skills in your life. You're actually learning skills in community as well. You're journeying with usually a group of guys, and you're coming out of some of that embedded hiddenness in your life. Well, how do people get stuck at that stage? Well, one way you get stuck is you remain simply a recovery consumer. You're always learning, but learning becomes an end in itself. Another place that people get stuck is they get stuck in what I call rigid or black and white thinking. And I've seen people who are excited about recovery show a lot of intolerance towards other people because they're doing it different. This is the way it worked for me, so you need to do things exactly this way or that way. All you need to do is follow these steps. They push their template on other people. So that's sometimes where people get stuck in that. Then other people are like switchers. And what happens when you start to journey in recovery in a community, you might get bored because you're going, okay, I'm not applying this, but I get bored because I want new information. But at some point, new information that's not applied just feels thin and shallow. The other problem with community is if you are unwilling to look at some of your character defects, those will quickly become exposed. And it's always easier to say, well, this group's not working for me when your character defects are being exposed. So any one of those things I see causing people to get stuck in what seems like a really positive stage, but it doesn't progress past the learning and growing stage. All right, stage 3 is the productive stage. And at this stage, we shift from simply being a learner approach, and we start to care and take responsibility for others in our journey. We're not just worried about our recovery, but we're also thinking about the people that we're journeying with. We check in with other guys, not just because we need it, but because others need it as well. When guys slip and slide, we provide an encouraging word to help others get on track. We identify some of our gifts, maybe contribute to our group, our recovery community. So, what does that stage feel like? Well, for one, it's often busy, and sometimes that busyness comes with a sense of meaning and purpose and pleasure. This recovery means a lot to me, and I can see how I'm now aware how my recovery doesn't just affect me, but it also affects other guys who are looking up to me. Is there any downsides or problematic parts of this part of the journey? There's a few. I think we can develop perhaps a performance mentality where we feel like we are loved for what we do, not who we are. So it feels conditional. Here's another big one I've seen. We can mask our brokenness with busyness. Really, we are still running from some of the lingering pain in our lives. Eventually, most people, and this might be a good time and place for me to reintroduce something we talked about that started the process, and that is the wall. The wall is where pain catches up to you. Tools and recovery tricks that have been helpful for you now seem anemic and shallow. At some point, the formula for your recovery starts working. It stops working, and it stops working because your brokenness catches up to you. Really, a lot of your recovery was running from your brokenness, and now in this stage, your brokenness that's always been with you catches you. Some people, for example, go into recovery with a designed end point. And I've had a number of guys like this. They're going, okay, I want my recovery to accomplish this. Here's a classic one. I want my recovery to save my marriage, to resurrect my marriage. And what happens when your wife still decides to leave you, or for example, your kids won't accept your entreaties for reconciliation, something painful and disorienting happens, you can't get around, you go, that's it. Recovery's not for me. There's all sorts of things that life serves up to us in terms of pain. But it could be simply childhood scripts that you've grown up with, that you've never learned to separate out truth from lies. It could be abuse that you've suffered or trauma you've suffered, and you've simply been masking that, and now it hits you smack dab in the face. For me, it was a serious midlife crisis, or it could be a child that goes wayward. It could be a whole number of things where life stops working, and that provides a serious, serious challenge to your recovery. Your recovery is not truly tested until you hit the wall. And let me say this about the wall. The only way past the wall is not under it. It's not around it. Reminds me of that we're going on a bear hunt thing you might have learned as a kid. The only way past the wall is through it. Through the pain, leaning into the brokenness. And it's probably a message that most of us do not want to hear. For those who are brave, for those who are not running from their brokenness, it leads us to step 4. And step 4 is the journey inward. It's at this point we come to recognize not only our glory, but our depravity. Not only the ego side of us, but our shadow side. At this point, we again deal with the formative pain of our childhood, where people perhaps betrayed us or wounded us or never gave us what we so desperately needed. We deal with our disappointments, our unmet expectations in life, our resentments, our bitterness. And I believe this is a spiritual journey that, you want to journey through with God. You want to journey through with counseling or therapy or a spiritual director or a sponsor. In this stage, again, we look at those formative scripts, those mistaken beliefs. This is all part of the journey inward. If it sounds painful, it is. If it sounds disorienting, it is. And it's at this stage where we are not just struggling with pain, but oftentimes people often struggle with confusion, and they struggle with doubts. Maybe even some of your spiritual beliefs are severely shaken, and you can go through very clearly some form of deconstruction. All of this can happen at this stage. Where do we get stuck? Well, we get stuck perhaps if we remain in introspection, where we get lost in our own pain. And it can lead us into a whirlpool of self-absorption or discontentment, bitterness or ungratefulness. But I do think there's a way through it. If we are willing to journey with others and maybe some helpful guides, we can get to a place where we actually come to a stronger place through the brokenness. You might have heard the stages of grief, and I know that the stages of grief were, what was her, anger, denial, bargaining, depression, acceptance. I think I got most of them. But it's interesting, the author of that it was actually a team. They actually said there was a sixth stage that never made it into the book that they realized was missing, and they wished it had made it into the book, and that was a stage of meaning. A stage of meaning is, what did that brokenness, where has, for example, God shaped and formed us, or life shaped and formed us, and giving us meaning even to some of those painful events in our lives. It doesn't mean those things are good, but how did we learn and grow? How do they shape and form us? And in the idea, in order to move through this stage, you come to a place of acceptance and meaning where you go, this is my body, for good or ill. This is my story. This is my wound. These are my failures. These are my regrets for what I've done or not done. This is my pain for what has been done to me. This is my broken marriage, or this is my singleness. Whatever it is, if we say yes to that and come to a place where we're willing to live in that, it's like, you know what? In this place, I can come to a place of acceptance and meaning and go, I have learned and grown through the pain of this wall. If we're willing to trust our way and journey through that, then we actually come to stage 5, which is the journey outward. We emerge on the other side. And this is interesting because this is kind of like some of the earlier things we did, the productive life. But all of a sudden, we are now changed. We don't need the outward props or scaffolding when we used to serve others. We spend less time thinking about what people think and more time thinking about people. Success or failures doesn't own us. Achievement, accomplishment, accumulation, that doesn't drive us. Discontentment has a less of a hold on us. The first early steps, stage 1, 2, and 3, it's like you felt like they offered you some degree of control, but at this stage, you realize, you know what? I actually never really had control. It's about learning to live a life of trust. Now, stage 6, and I know this sounds a little ethereal, or is called the life of love. And it's simply people who exude love and compassion towards other people. There's a maturity. It's not that everything, it's not like they're always talking. It's actually not so much what they say. It's simply who they are. When you're around them, you feel loved and accepted. You feel like, it's like they're God with skin on. Not everybody gets to that point. One of my favorite prayers is, God, would you help me grow up before I grow old? Not, where I don't spend time thinking about me. I think it's C.S. Lewis that said, humility is not thinking less of ourselves. It's just thinking about ourselves less. All of that I know sounds pretty heavy, and you might need to go back and listen to some of this again. Some of this might feel overwhelming, but I will simply say this. It's good to know that you're on a journey, and it's more than just having a good filter on your computer. You are entering a journey that will change who you are if you allow yourself to grow and progress in it. That's why I say, for me, my recovery has been a gift to me, because it's been a window on a whole, larger amount of personal growth. So here's some stages that I would say that you could ask yourself. What stage do I see myself in? Number 2, where am I stuck? Number 3, what would it look like to get unstuck? Number 4, have I experienced some version of a recovery wall? And number 5, are you willing to deal with your brokenness rather than run away from it? All right, So there's some thought. I know it's heavy, but I appreciate your feedback. If you want to connect with me, you can email me at bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. We'll see you next time.